Well, let me cut to the chase. No cuts at all. To hear 80 Democratic congressmen say it, that's it. No budging on entitlements, no touching entitlements. You need proof. Congressional Democrats won't give an inch. Listen to me try to get a Texas congresswoman to offer so much as a single cut. Everything you said was taxes, 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 and not a word about anything you did.
You haven't heard anything I've said because you've never stopped talking to listen.
Well, what are you going to cut? Tell me what you cut.
I just finished telling you that there are a number of things of which we can look at.
No, you told me things you do to raise taxes. That's what you told me. You got to tell me one thing you cut. I beg you, Congressman, one thing you would tell your district, I'm going to cut this. What would it be?
You
don't know, do you?
Well, yes, I do know, but I have to have time to explain it. I can't tell you I'm going to walk in and cut this and cut that.
Well, we got a lot of email on that one. Some said I was rude. Others said that the Congresswoman was clueless. Either way, we didn't make much progress, did we? So as the week ends, where do I start? With a Congress that can't act and can't cut, facing a deadline that won't move. With so much off the table now, I'm wondering whether Republicans offering tax hikes with nothing in return just walk away from the table. That could be a very real possibility. And to hear former Office Depot CEO Steve Udland tell it, a welcome one. The corporate titan says that a bad deal is worse than no deal. Also with us, Town Hall's Elisabeth Meinecke and roll calls, Shira Tuplitz. All right, so let's get a sense where you think this is going, Steve. You don't like where it's going.
No, look, we need a deal. We're sitting on a precipice here with the whole world watching. The markets are expecting a deal. The credit rating agencies are expecting a deal. And if we don't have some sort of balanced deal, which includes spending cuts and some sort of revenue raise, even if it's a small deal with a process for the future, you're going to see markets react not only in this country but around the world, and you're going to see the credit rating agencies act. And if that happens, our interest rates are going to go up, the cost of our debt's going to go up, and it's going to exacerbate the problem. So this thing will spin out of control, and we're sitting here at a point in time when we're playing politics, when in fact the entire world, the business community, everybody around Washington is saying, look, guys, make some progress here.
Shira, what worries me now is when the next shoe drops. In other words, if Democrats, as these largely 80 Congress that did today, following the Congressional Black Caucus, and others, including Chuck Schumer, who said there's no reason to go after entitlements right now. What's to stop Republicans from saying, then we're out of here, we're done?
There isn't a lot to stop Republicans from saying, nope, then this isn't going to work. We aren't going to be able to come to any kind of consensus before Christmas or before we go off the fiscal cliff. And a big hint of that was John Boehner. He is headed home to Ohio for the weekend. Obviously, the lines of communication remain open with the White House. But that, to me, is very much a move, a political move, saying, hey, you need to come to the table a little bit more, White House and congressional Democrats, if we have any chance of making progress and getting a deal.
Elizabeth?
Well, I think anyone in this situation would agree that you can't make the perfect the enemy of the good. But I do agree that no deal probably at this point would be better than a bad deal, just because bad deals usually create more problems than they solve. We saw that with Obamacare. And secondly, if you take the pressure off of Congress by doing a short-term deal, you're never going to get them to come back to the table and address some of these serious reforms that need to happen. Because if there's one thing we have learned about this Congress, they may not work well under pressure, but they don't really work at all when there is no pressure.
No, they don't work at all, period. I mean, Steve Udland, what worries me about these developments of late is that a good example of Dick Durbin of Illinois saying, we can't do things in a rush. You're not going to make these decisions in a matter of days. And vilifying Republicans for essentially creating this predicament. Well, it was this constant punting and pushing forward this deadline that created this so-called rush. So if not now, when? And I wonder if not this opportunity, is it really going to be done next year? Or is this debt just going to overwhelm us?
Well, there are a lot of people pushing to just say, let's go off the cliff.
Right.
The problem is that if we do that, and the reason is because we'll get all of these tax hikes, which one group wants, and we'll get certain spending cuts, which the other group wants. And so that solves everything, doesn't it? Well, no, it doesn't, because it's the worst of both cases. And I think all the rational people, the business community, the global markets are looking at this and saying, look, a bad deal is bad. Let's not do a bad deal, but let's do some deal. Let's do some progress which is balanced. and then, as part of that, lay out a process to do bigger tax reform and entitlement reform, which clearly is necessary.
I
we can't keep
love you
going.
dearly, Steve, but that's like one of my diet resolutions. I hope springs eternal, but I look at my waist and it's.
But Neil, it's
eternally getting
got to
bigger.
happen.
Yeah, I
it's
agree
got to
with you.
happen.
I agree, but
Yeah.
here's the next thing that they worry about: who gets the blame if things go kablooey? If you just want to play that game, wouldn't Republicans be wise to say we went so far as even to offer not only a tax hike, but actually to go back to the Clinton rates? We didn't like the idea, but we did it. We offered it, and they put the ball in the president's court. What's crazy about that?
Well, polling shows that voters and citizens are split. If we go off the fiscal cliff, the blame will be divided between the White House, but does lean a little bit more towards Congress, in particular congressional Republicans.
But wouldn't it be
still
less so,
mostly
Shira?
split.
Wouldn't it be less so if Boehner and colleagues come back and say, look, we agreed to hiking taxes. We were on board. Let it be known that we agreed.
Yeah, if Boehner and the House Republican caucus caved, yeah, I mean, they could say they did everything they could. On the other hand, you have to remember the dynamics of the Republican Party, right? A lot of Republicans, and not just Boehner's caucus, but also in the Senate, and particularly in the Senate, a lot of these guys are worried about primary challenges from their right.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at the Senate map in 2014, a whole lot of Republicans up for re-election, and a lot of these big states that tend to the right anyway. I mean, they're worried about the re-election here already. Even though we just had an election, they're worried about it again. I think that's a key component. They need to cater to this part of their party, this part by holding the line as long as they possibly can.
You know, Elizabeth, to that point, I've heard a number of Republicans tell me, usually off the record when they say this, that they think Democrats are overplaying their hand, and particularly the president is overplaying his, that he won an election, he didn't win a landslide, that he might have, in fact, won an edict for higher taxes on the wealthy, but he didn't win a pass on avoiding all these entitlement cuts, and it's hell to pay for him if this goes kablooey. What do you say?
Yeah, Neil, you know, that may be true in fact, but unfortunately for the GOP, until they learn how to win a messaging war, they could win all of the policy battles they want, but they will not win politically until they learn how to communicate this in the right way to the American people.
All right, so here we be, right, folks, without a deal. Getting further from a deal, unless something's happening behind the scenes that I'm missing. But at the very least, if I'm missing something, it would be potentially an awful deal that is disproportionate to your fear at the outset, Steve, with tax hikes more than dominating the scene and very few cuts. Then what? What if we have a deal like that?
Yeah. Well, you know, and that would be terrible because that wouldn't be the balance that the markets are looking for and so forth. You look, all of the concentration has been on the political side. Who wins, who loses, and it's, you know, it's the people in Washington we're talking about. They're forgetting who they're serving and why they're there. You know, businesses, Main Street, the markets are all saying, look, guys, you've dug a $16 trillion hole. The math doesn't work. You cannot tax your way to prosperity, and you can't tax your way out of it. The money simply isn't there. You'd run the government for a matter of weeks if you seized all the wealth of the wealthy. So it doesn't work. You've got to have a balanced approach to this thing, and you've got to have spending cuts. And in order to do that, you've got to have entitlement reform. And you'd rather have some sort of balanced approach, which then describes a longer-term approach now in order to forget about the politics in order to settle the markets.
Shira, I'm beginning to wonder. I don't think the markets will like this either way, the way it's developing. But what's your prediction? How do you see this all sorting out?
I predict there might be a deal. If there is a deal, I think it's under 50% chance we'll get any deal. But this deal, if it does happen, I think will be a small deal. We'll see some framework. You know, they'll raise tax rates a little bit, and then they'll basically say, okay, we promised to deal with the tax code and entitlement reform, and we're going to form another super committee, and they have until March 1st or some kind of deadline to get this done. And what that would do is that would say Democrats could go back to the race and say, okay, we claim victory, we raise taxes on the highest income earners in America, and Republicans can say, all right, we have a promise and a process for entitlement reform in the coming year. But the reality is that's actually not a very good thing because Congress can't do anything, and these committees have not been very fruitful in the past. It's how we got ourselves in the spot in the first place through this super committee that couldn't get a deal to avoid sequestration.
Elizabeth?
I agree. I mean, it's kind of Chris Brown and Rihanna. They keep going back to the same, situation, and it just doesn't work out. And I think bottom line, yeah, I don't know that there's going to be a deal, but if it is, I mean, the pattern is going to be let's kick the can down the road. I agree with that completely, and I agree that you really won't see any change because that hasn't helped the economy at this point, and it probably will not help it in the future.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Guys, thank you very, very much.